Oh, what's up? Oh, that's echoey. What is up, guys? I'm Guy Swann. We've got a hell of a panel here. Going to be talking about becoming a sovereign individual in the clown world age, which is an interesting prospect on its face. We live in a kind of a crazy world these days. But we've got a hell of a group here. We got Pascal Gauthier, we've got Parker Lewis, Robert Breedlove, and Matt Barkley. Just actually go down the line if you want to introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are and what you are in Bitcoin.
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Pascal Gauthier. I'm CEO at Ledger. So please raise your hand if you own a Ledger. All right. Thank you. Merci.
I'm Parker Lewis. I'm head of business development at Unchained Capital. And like Ledger, we help people secure their own private keys in multisig.
My name is Robert Breedlove, host of the What is Money show. I like to talk and write about Bitcoin.
My name is Matt Barkley. I am an NFL quarterback, going on my 10th year now, so kind of one of the old guys in the room, but young in life, so there's a lot of life ahead of me, and I've luckily found Bitcoin early enough to where I see it as the future. So,
Hell yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I am Guy Swann, host of Bitcoin Audible, the guy who's read more about Bitcoin than anybody else you know. All right. So, to kick this off, I feel like we have lots of generic conversations about sovereignty, but I feel like we often don't. Sovereignty is anything but an objective term. And we definitely live in a world where getting sovereignty is usually a question of degree, not a question of on-off, right? Like, we're always dependent on each other in a lot of different ways. So being that sovereignty is not objective and it means something different to each person, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean to you?
Well, you will call me biased because, we do what we do at Ledger. We secure private keys and we make them easy to use. We secure crypto, NFT, we make them easy to use. And for me, this Bitcoin revolution and the crypto revolution in general has always been about empowering people back with their digital lives. I always find it very amusing that we went from, owning stuff to not owning anything anymore. I mean, if you think about music services and streaming, you are allowed to buy that subscription for the rest of your life and at the end own nothing.
Yeah.
Okay? And so that's wrong. Like, we don't want our lives to be captured by banks, by big techs, et cetera, et cetera. And so what's happening right now is, this revolution of sort of tokenization, crypto, Bitcoin, blockchain, Web3, metaverse. I mean, you call it the way you want. It's suddenly you can own your digital life. And so you can create your digital self in a way that was never possible before. And you can, of course, secure it with a ledger. So the security will bring you freedom, but the security is the start of your digital being. And to me, this is what makes you sovereign, because suddenly your physical self was you, your digital self didn't belong to you, and now it can belong to you, and you can be a full sovereign individual because we're both physical and digital beings.
Gotcha. There's something kind of funny about the whole subscription thing. Like, I've always wondered if this was inherent to the digital world, or if do we just subscribe to our whole lives? Like everything that we have. And it's interesting. It's so unique to end up in a place where you can truly own something digital. And I've increasingly wondered if this is going to push us back, like the embassy and run your own node and stuff. Like, people are talking very seriously, and I think it's a lot because of the incentives of Bitcoin and what it means to own something digital for the first time, truly own it. You think about, am I running my own server? Is my information really mine? And I feel like for decades we haven't. It's just kind of been this thing that you don't talk about, and the digital world is just something you rent from somebody else. So it's really interesting. But Parker, do you agree? You have a different definition? What's your?
I don't know if I necessarily have a different definition. I think that, like you mentioned, Guy, the term sovereignty is hard to define, and it's just a range or a spectrum, and that I think freedom is really kind of an idea that's even though it might be more difficult to define and a spectrum as well, that it's something, at least in the United States, Texas, hopefully more and more places in the world, that people demand. And that when I think about Bitcoin in that context, and I think it is in the framework of sovereignty, is that when people start to understand what money is at a fundamental level, which a lot of people think that money is the root of all evil, but seeing it as one of the greatest inventions to export freedom throughout the world, that what money allows for is you to produce things for other human beings and to convert that into a range of choice that several generations ago, to steal Hayek, wouldn't have been possible. And what that ultimately makes us is more dependent on everybody else, but not dependent on any one person. And that the freedom to be able to go out into the world and pursue your own interests and then be able to take that output and live your life how you want to live it is a very powerful thing. And that has been corrupted and coerced through the legacy monetary system. And what Bitcoin does particularly is it takes the fly out of that ointment, and it allows people to go out, produce, and what it ultimately means is deliver value to other human beings and have an economic incentive to do that, and not be able to have some bank or some central bank prevent you from having access to your wealth. So when I think of sovereignty in Bitcoin, it is I can produce value, and no man, woman, institution, bureaucrat can prevent me from taking that value and going out into the world and doing with it what I see fit.
Gotcha. There's an interesting, you bring up the money is the root of all evil thing, and actually this might be a good way to hand it over to Rob, because you speak a little bit about money. Tell me, what is money? What is money and sovereignty?
That's a long question to answer, actually.
Just 3 hours?
I think we just take the word, and you hit the nail on the head, right? It's the authority to act as you see fit, ultimately. But if you take that word apart, you have sov, reign, right? Like when a king reigns over his people. And I think another way that sovereignty was described is, there's an old quote, sovereign is he who can make the exception. So if you're operating within a game or a set of rules, and there's an individual or a group that can make exception to those rules that you cannot, they are sovereign over you, right? They can steal from you, they can control you, they can manipulate you. That's effectively what a central bank is. It's a legal monopoly that can bend the rules to its own advantage. That's what inflation is. It's a bending and twisting of the rules to enrich few at the expense of many. And I think the amazing thing about Bitcoin is that we, for the first time in history, have this property right independent of the monopoly on violence, that is the state. So people can opt out of that structure that preys on their property and ultimately just reign over themselves, right? Bitcoin's just a database that no one can make an exception to. Therefore, it maximizes the sovereignty of the individuals that make use of it.
Sheesh. That's powerful.
Thank you.
I mean, in addition to that, I'll just say, as growing up hearing that, the love of money is the root of all evil, knowing that Bitcoin provides an answer to, not only freedom, because I believe it does provide freedom, but it's more so power over your own freedoms that you have, and I believe that we're entitled to as human beings. And so financially, to invest in an asset where you have control over your freedoms is kind of what sold me early on.
Yeah.
Go Bills.
It's funny that we kind of ended up, and it makes sense too in fiat world, that the belief that money is the root of all evil has arisen because it's seen as such a great source of inequality, a great source of feeling out of control, feeling like you don't own your life and you don't get to decide where it goes. And one thing I've talked about on the podcast, which people we talk about, like the government printing trillions of dollars and just issuing it out to people as if it's normal. And we printed $6 trillion, I think, was it in 2021 or 2020? I don't remember, one of those years. We spent $6 trillion over a ridiculously short span of time. And I don't think people truly understand what that means. Like, the free market works because our input matters. Because like I control my resources, right? Like money is not the root of all evil. Money is the root of society. It's how you build one piece of a thing and I build the other, and then together we actually have something that we've cooperated and we understand the value of it because we have our skin in the game. You know, when I choose to, you know, buy my kid braces instead of go on vacation, that's a meaningful choice because of the hours it took to get the money to have one of those options, you know? So when you print $6 trillion out of thin air and you just throw it at some obnoxious list of companies in a 6,000-page bill that nobody even read, the average American makes $2 million from birth to death. Their entire lifespan. Everything that they have meaningfully done in the economy, every time that they have, you know, funded Apple instead of Android or whatever all their products, every time they have not gone on vacation to pay a medical bill, whatever it is, that exists in that $2 million. And you have these incremental pushes of certain things in the economy. If you print $6 trillion, you have deleted 3 million people from existence. Their lives just don't matter. They might as well have never participated in the economy at all. You just made them 100% slaves to whatever $1 trillion subsidy you just gave to Corporation A. No shit, the free market doesn't work. It's not a free market. Like if money isn't meaningful, then what the hell is it? Of course it's the root of all evil because of how it works.
Yeah, but I don't think it's money. I think it's the correct sentence should be the monetary system, or the current monetary system is the root of all evil.
Exactly.
You know? Because what Bitcoin, yes, you can go, yes. But it's something that, you know, struck me right at the beginning, the fact that I got into Bitcoin in 2014 after a meeting with Vences Cesares at Zappo, who is probably one of the guys that convinced the most people to join Bitcoin. And I thought, okay, it's great because everyone can access this market. I mean, talking about free market means like, how can you access the market? And it was at the time just after I sold my first company, or we listed it at the NASDAQ, actually, it went public. And so I had access to wealth, and I realized that I had unfair access then to financial products. You know, if you get rich, you get richer because suddenly you have access to things that other people don't have access to. And so, and it didn't feel too good to me because it felt like unjust. Like why? Because I have so much money, suddenly now I can have all these financial products at a low cost, etc., when other people that have less money actually need to pay more. So it felt like the other way around. And discovering Bitcoin at the same time was like, okay, well, Bitcoin fixes this because now everybody can access. And my first experiences in Bitcoin where that it wasn't actually so much the rich that were going into Bitcoin. It was like it was sort of everyone going into Bitcoin because it was, you know, how do you say in English, you know, plain level field, or you know, it was just like everyone having the same
rules for everybody.
Same rules for everybody. And it's still the case today. And so Bitcoin, since the beginning, has been a massive retail revolution, which is weird for a financial instrument. I mean, usually it's, you know, big corporations that go first, etc. And so you start to document yourself, and you look at the gold rush, and you know, when you read about the gold rush, exactly the same happened. It was like the crazy people first, and then it was the white collars, and eventually, in the end, the corporations come.
We're the crazy people stage, right?
Yeah, this is the crazy people room. So, hello, crazy people. But people were a lot crazier in 2008 and a lot crazier in, you know, 12, 13, 14, etc. But it's okay. This is still the crazy people room, and it's good because it feels like you know, for the people, by the people, blah blah blah. But it's true. Like, you know, it's really what's happening. And all my experiences everywhere in the world, because Ledger we ship product in 195 countries, actually everywhere in the world. And so that was very surprising. It's like shit. Everyone is doing this.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's like the world is doing it.
One thing that you brought up, which was Wences Casares.
Yeah.
He probably is responsible for kind of incepting most people's understanding of Bitcoin. But he had a quote in a podcast, I think it was 2017, where he said that, you know, when my grandkids come and ask me what I did in my life, how do you want to be remembered? I want to be remembered as a small part of a large group of people that help Bitcoin succeed. And that, Guy, what you're talking about is the legacy financial system, legacy monetary system, the root of all evil, it is the opposite mentality. It's a small group of people trying to exert outsized control over how they think an economy should be managed from the top down. And that in Bitcoin, that idea of freedom and sovereignty, by stripping away that ability for others to take away control, that we all get to be just a small part in a much larger scheme, a much larger economic system to push forward freedom. And that Bitcoin really is the foundation of that. Without it, in my view, it wouldn't be possible.
Yeah. I've increasingly come to think that, like, there's no such thing as a free market, but just in general, there's no real freedom because you're dependent on society's degree of the ability to protect it without sound money. Like it's a prerequisite to actually having that. And we've been in this facade of like, oh, we play freedom. You know, we put on the freedom costume, but we don't have it. We don't have a market that responds to the market participants. We have a market that is dictated, that is controlled. I mean, the most important price in the economy is the price of time. How much does it cost to use resources today versus tomorrow? And that's the interest rate. We have it set by a board. Like the politicians get up on stage and they talk every week. It's like, what are we going to do to the interest rate? What price of time is it going to be this week? You know, it's absurd. But it actually brings me back to a point that I wanted to hit, is the idea of the conflict, both the conflict and kind of the feedback between the sovereignty of the individual and the sovereignty of society, and really why money is so important to the heart of this. Like, so an example I was thinking of was the right to bear arms. You know, the idea of the Second Amendment is that the ultimate biggest risk to your freedom, to human rights, is your government. Like, historically, your government is always the one that is going to oppress you. The idea of the Second Amendment is to have a population that can defend itself. But if you're the only one, sure, if I learn how to use a gun and protect myself or whatever, I can protect myself from a thief who comes into my house. But if I'm the only one, we don't have societal defense of tyranny. I'm not gonna stop tyranny by myself. It requires everyone to participate in this. So in that context, the challenge between the broad sovereignty versus the individual sovereignty, how does Bitcoin change that? Is Bitcoin just a gun? Like, does it not matter if only one of us use it? Do we all have to use it? Or like, how does that change the dynamic? I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I think it's useful to just look at money as a database in many ways. And so we could say that Bitcoin is taking that option out of money, the control P option that the Fed uses, right? It's literally a control P.
Yeah.
It's an SQL database at the Fed, and they press a button and add zeros. And they're just confiscating wealth from everyone else at an effortless keystroke, right? We sacrifice time, labor, energy to acquire money, and then it's pilfered from us via control P. And this, like, the cascading consequences of this are disastrous. And you know this at an individual psychological level. It's much easier to spend someone else's money than it is your own, right? Much easier. It's much easier to be frivolous with that spending. And so we end up with all this misallocated capital in the world. Government spending's run amok. There's no check on it, right? It's effectively this limited liability corporation that can just paper over all of its losses and deficits. And that just destroys civilization, in my opinion. And so it's kind of simple. Just giving people the power to hold the fruit of their labor in something that cannot be violated. And then you let the market sort it out, right? You're taking coercion out of the equation, or taking the exceptions out of the database. And it's just richly empowering to everyone.
Yeah. Matt, How did you come to this? I'm really curious. When did Bitcoin start for you?
I got introduced to blockchain in general through Ethereum first, just seeing the impact that the dApps could have, and doing the deep dive into blockchain in general, Bitcoin was very quickly after that, and I just saw the potential that it had to, I think, change society in a few different ways. But then ultimately, having control over those assets, like I've said, which cannot be tampered with, cannot be taken away. I just was trying to look into the future and see what that would look like, and it made sense to me.
Nice. I was thinking about your situation is kind of interesting because, like particularly like people in entertainment, professional sports or whatever, you're under contract, you know, and of course you're like a journeyman, you know, you'll bounce around, but which is interesting, like because I wonder if you see that contract as, you know, you're restricted often, or as I understand it, you're restricted in some of the things you can do, and you can't party so often, you know, like sort of things like this. Is this something that you actually see that you're taking advantage of it because you're kind of selling yourself, or is the contract a limitation on you, and how do you kind of treat your sovereignty around that, and how has Bitcoin started to play into it?
Yeah, and as in any contract, there are restrictions, and I mean, I'm a W-2 employee, so it's a unique situation. I mean, I'm not complaining about, you know, the money I've made over my career, but at the end of the day, having complete control over that to where I think the right restrictions are good. And if you take an analogy of a fish, you know, if you think it's best for a fish to live out of water and give it freedom on land, it's not going to be good for that fish, right? And having proper restrictions in your life, I believe, gives you freedom, but it's not up to the government. It's not up to an external authority to decide what those are. Yeah. I believe it is a choice.
You sign the other side of it, right?
Exactly, and especially with your finances. And so you make a good point about, you know, society and what society deems to be correct, because that's why there's so much polarity and, you know, partisan in our country.
What?
But at the end of the day, when enough people agree that they do want full control and they have access, it almost, to your Second Amendment point, it seems like it's a guerrilla warfare type answer where it can't be, you know, spotted in, you know, on the satellite or in binoculars. It's not the Revolutionary War where it's just a marching, you know, it's here and there. It's pockets of people. It's all over the world that are banding together to, you know, assert their own authority.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, like about why these pressures are going to continue to kind of crack away the current power structure and stuff, because, you know, large centralized entities are really good and really like attacking large centralized entities or smaller centralized entities, right? They like to have a target. They like to pretend that there's a head of the snake to cut off. And when there is no explicit target, it's increasingly like almost feels like they're lost. Like they try to invent a target, you know? Vietnam's such a good example of like the enemy is everywhere, right? The enemy could be anywhere. The enemy's in the trees, like, you know, that guerrilla warfare thing, and how that kind of changes the dynamic, because even if only, you know, 5% of us quietly but strongly, like with real conviction, take our sovereignty and, you know, vote with our feet, leave when we need to. We memorize the 24 words and we get that F out of Dodge when the problems arise or the unfriendly jurisdictions arise. You're looking at a way to command the wealth of society in a way and direct it in a way that's not been possible before.
So I agree with you, but I feel, to me, it's like more of a blitzkrieg than it is a guerrilla. Because if you think about what value is, you know, value is consensus. So to your question, like, can you be the one guy doing Bitcoin? Well, you know, you'd be pretty fucking lonely. But but so consensus mechanism is what's happening right now. And, you know, nothing has value unless you and I agree has value. Like, you cannot agree on your own that something has value, or you never sell it. And so if suddenly the five of us and then this room, etc., agree that something has value, then it starts to get more value. And so what's happening right now, it's more of a blitzkrieg, because 300 million people in the world agree that this has value, probably actually more, like 300 million people own what they think has value, and you probably already have like a billion plus convinced that this has value, and suddenly, you know, you're not talking about guerrilla anymore. Like, you're talking about like a massive scale invasion, And I think this is why it's so powerful, because it's not little pockets of people that are in little cities or little villages, etc., and start to think for their own. I think it's a very profound revolution. And so why that is because when you buy Bitcoin, I mean, sure, you expect to make some money or to protect value, etc., but what you're really doing is you're voting. It's a vote. And the European Parliament right now is trying to hurt Bitcoin and crypto in general. I'm fighting that regulatory battle in Europe, for you guys too, by the way, because whatever Europe decides will sort of taint the world. But I think what regulators don't understand is that they're starting to fight their own people, because the people have voted. But when they buy Bitcoin, they actually vote. They say, yes, I want this, yes, etc. And so it's a large-scale invasion because, again, 300 million people today, probably already being plus convinced. And the trend of crypto adoption is on par with internet adoption. So if you follow that trend, you know that in 10 years, will be probably like 3 billion people on Bitcoin or blockchains of different sort. And so this is where the game is over. Like, the people have spoken.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's kind of the nature of value. And it's also like one of those elements of the monetary pressures why the cohesion or the pressure to settle on one is so powerful is because you are voting and you have to explicitly vote at the exception of something else. I can have a Twitter profile and I can have an Instagram profile and a Facebook profile. I can post on all of them or whatever. But I can't hold value in two things at once. I have to choose. If I have $100, it's either $100 or it's 220,000 sats, one or the other. And it's interesting to see that this is the native currency of the internet, right? And we're slowly but surely eating away at those choices. But I wanted to ask too, sovereignty, particularly the idea of reigning over yourself. Is sovereignty necessarily extra legal? Is it necessarily something? It seems like if you're asking the jurisdiction for sovereignty or asking for the laws to be friendly to that, aren't you in a sense giving it up just by asking permission in the first place? So is sovereignty something that necessitates a non-jurisdictional environment or a non-jurisdictional existence? You are your jurisdiction. Yeah, I'll throw it to you, Parker.
I would say that something has to exist beyond the state for it to truly be an agent of freedom. And that if it was something that was just in existence because of some dictate, like a fiat currency, that is unsustainable. But I think that is also, it's like money is just a tool, right? And I think to your prior point, if just one person wanted freedom and everybody else around them didn't, that one person isn't getting freedom. Being a proud Texan, if I think about the Alamo, we lost the Alamo, we won the war, but if one person was willing to fight, there was no independence, right? And so thinking about what caused those people to, we sit here in this comfortable room, air conditioned in Miami, and get to talk about money and think about it. But ultimately you have to want freedom, and freedom is something far deeper than any tool, I think. And then everything that we create to be able to realize that desire for freedom are just different paths along the way that we have to follow to get there. And so I think that anything that truly affords that can't be something that is dictated by some legal structure. I think we form legal structures around things that help preserve those, not that they could somehow be a creation of it.
Okay. I was going to toss it over to you.
One of the things we often fail to realize about the rule of law is that it grounds out exclusively in property. That's why the law exists, right? To resolve disputes over scarce resources, to give people a non-violent way to resolve disputes, right, in a legal framework. But it's all about property. It's the exclusive purpose of the government. It's the purpose of law. And then there's deep psychological implications here as well. So if you want to drive people crazy, just keep twisting the rules of the game, right? If you sit down to play a game, but the rules change every hand or every round, you're just going to get frustrated. No one's going to succeed. No one's going to have a good time. You're just going to want to leave the game. And that's effectively what's happening in the fiat system, right? It's just we can't play the game, right? If you give, one of my mentors a long time ago told me, just give smart people clear rules and they'll figure it out. It's really that simple. But we can't get clarity of rules in this most important economic mechanism in the world we call money. So, I mean, I have this thesis that this is actually contributing to the mass psychosis we see in the world. The faster we violate property via fiat currency inflation, the more we're twisting those rules, the more confusing the game is, the more insane people go. So I think all these things are connected. And if that's correct, even marginally, then the more we maximize individual sovereignty, we move away from mass psychosis, hopefully to mass sanity. And so sovereignty is sanity, something like that.
Matt, let's toss it over to you. I want to see what your thoughts on that are.
I think, you brought up rules, and I mentioned that even with restrictions before. And I think as humans, we long for structure, right? We want a place to call home. We're not just nomads, just kind of letting the wind blow us through life, right? We have these set of ways that we want to live our lives. And I think when we're constantly being told what to do and how to do that, I think there's a rebellion against that authority. I'm a father of 3 kids, and I see that constantly, right? That rebellion against authority. And at the end of the day, as a father, I feel like I know what's best, and so I put things in place to help them succeed. But when that figure in your life doesn't have your best intentions in mind, I think that's when things can go awry. And so I think we've seen that in the financial systems. We've seen that in other areas of life. And I think it's why Bitcoin is an answer, because it provides a set of rules that is clear as day and it cannot be manipulated, that does provide freedom in your life.
It reminds me of that D-Hawk quote. The complex rules and regulation lead to simple and stupid behavior. Simple and clear rules lead to complex, intelligent behavior. And, it's like you're talking about using the example of a game. Like, imagine if in football, like there's like a board sitting on the side of the game while you're in the middle of the game, and they're changing the rules. They're like, okay, like now you have to be 2 yards ahead, or now you have to take off your pants or something. Like, imagine like how, like if you just we're constantly changing the rules. And even worse is that there's a whole bunch of people over there vying for the board to change the rules in their favor, to make sure that their team is the one that has the right number of cleats on their shoes. Who the hell would play that sport? Who would even risk doing anything, stepping out of line without explicit permission? You're just going to raise your hand to the board. It's like, can I do this? And so the game falls apart. And what happens? People stop playing the sport, and they start playing the refs. They start playing the board. And then the team that wins isn't the team that goes out and plays the best football. It's the team that goes up into the VIP room and gets the most drinks for the board guys. And I feel like that's where we are. And Bitcoin fundamentally changed that. It goes back to the simple, understandable rules, the simple, clear rules. And in doing so, it can inspire so much conviction and so much building and so much creativity that we see constantly. It's so funny that people tell me when they found Bitcoin, it's like I started caring about shit again. I just didn't care before. And it's fascinating to see your environment dictate so much about how you see the world, and how much Bitcoin changes that. Now, we're running a little on time. I wanted to get your thoughts. So everybody knows Bitcoin and holding your own keys, these things are important for sovereignty. But where are you failing at sovereignty? Where do you feel where's that next thing that you want to take care of, or your privacy or something like that. We'll start with you and we'll just go down the line.
Yeah, I'll tell you. But first, can I use this panel to ask 2 questions? Raise your hand if you don't own Bitcoin, and don't be shy. I just want to know. Question. You all have Bitcoin?
Get out.
Okay. And raise your hand, and I'm dying to ask, I want to know if this room is a Bitcoin maxi room. Raise your hand if you own Ethereum.
No.
Oh. Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Get out.
Get out. Is this the Bitcoin conference? What is this? Okay, so to answer your question, Bitcoin only. Raise your hand if you're Bitcoin only. Woo, okay. Okay.
My people.
All right, so this is hard technology. So there is weak technology, hard technology. What's been winning so far in this game has been weak technology, because actually the protocols are hard. They're very young. They're very inefficient, etc. And so weak technology has won because you want to hide the complexity of the protocol as much as possible, which is why Coinbase has been extremely successful. I'm not saying anything wrong about the Coinbase business, but it's weak tech. It's just an app on a phone, it's not tech, okay? It's weak tech. Hard technology is, how do you let people use the blockchain but still mask away the complexity and let them be sovereign using directly the blockchain? This is what Ledger is trying to solve as a problem, and let me tell you, it's fucking hard. And the reason why it's fucking hard is, first, every web revolution needs hardware. The Web 2 revolution has been led by the iPhone. If you don't have the iPhone, you don't do what you do today. You don't have Uber. There are many things that don't exist. Hardware leads web revolution. The next web revolution needs to be led by hardware with security inside. We're getting there. What we have today is good, but it's not great. And we're going towards greatness. Once you fix hardware, you have every layer that needs to be fixed on top of this, firmware, software, etc. Ultimately, what you want is you want to have a Coinbase-like experience, but fully decentralized.
Yeah.
And so you need to worry about seed recovery, you need to worry about multi-sig, you need to worry about multi-sig governance, etc. There's inheritance. There are certain pieces that aren't completely there yet that we will release, and that Ledger is working on it, and we'll release them soon. But this is the problem that needs to be fixed. And finally, for sovereign individuals, we have to realize that 70% of the people in the world don't live in democracies.
Yeah.
Just fact, okay? So what Ledger will announce this week, and so I'll give you a sneak peek, we're going to announce what we call freedom features. Freedom features mean, full nodes, Tor into Ledger Live, and a few other features like this, so individuals can really be sovereign and really live their lives freely without the fear of being tracked by their government. And which could feel like in the US, trying to evade or making you like a criminal. In other countries, it's the only way not to go to jail and not to be whipped in a public place or decapitated, okay? So we're working on these freedom features because we feel that it's important for 70% of the people in the world, so that's billions of human beings.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, Guy, when you say that everyone knows that they should hold their own keys and understand what that even means or what a key is, I think that the majority of Bitcoin is held in that way, but I think that the majority of people still don't understand the importance of that, and that I think that really you have to understand why Bitcoin is money. And if you're holding a bunch of cryptocurrencies, you probably don't. But you have to understand why Bitcoin is intuitive as money, and that then you have to actually go through the process of setting up a ledger, sending money to yourself, and recognizing that you go anywhere in the world and no one can touch you. No one can take that. And that, you cannot understand how powerful a position that is without understanding those two things. And I think more people need to understand that. And so, a lot of the work that Pascal does at Ledger, we do this at Unchained. We work with Ledger, Cold Card, Trezor, to help people take that ownership, that responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. I think through Bitcoin, more people need to figure out just how much responsibility they take over their own lives. And I think we're so very early in that mental shift. So I think
for sure,
everyone doing a more kind of intentional and deliberate job to advance that is important.
Yeah.
Once you've tasted that freedom, there's no going back.
Yeah.
Right. And that sovereignty, it's in universal demand. So I think all that serves Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think you can go down the rabbit hole of the security aspect and like the prepper aspect of full sovereignty over everything, whether it is your food source and whatever that is, living off the grid.
Got to be a prepper these days.
Yeah, and there's value to that, but I also think there's value in living life, and as a public figure, you can't. That's not really realistic right now for me. So I think at the end of the day, your keys, your coins, and being in cold storage is one of the easiest ways to have that sovereignty.
Yeah, and on going back to the idea of sovereignty of the individual versus sovereignty of the group or sovereignty of society, like I think one of the things that we can do aside from using sovereignty tools and running our own servers and holding our own keys is actually find the Bitcoiners in our lives. Like, it is about building a society. You don't do that by yourself. Yeah. Have the people that you trust, that hold the same values as you, and the people who care about sovereignty, and build something together. Like, find a problem and solve it. Like, I think that's what we're all here trying to do. I think that's the whole point of all of this. If we're not solving a problem, what the hell are we doing here? That's our mission. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me.
Merci.
Pascal, Parker, Breedlove, Nat. It's good to meet you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right.